recording. There's still some more people. Yeah, and as you all know, with the internet, somebody is having problem with the camera. My internet might freeze as well. Then I will rejoin as fast as I can. But it is what it is with Zoom meetings and internet. Do you think I should go, Marta? Should we start the presentation?
Yes, I'll be keeping watch on the waiting room and just Perfect. Go ahead. Yes.
So you can see my screen now? Perfect. So I will give a short introduction to trauma-sensitive equine-assisted mindfulness and how I have been thinking around it, why it looks the way it does, and what we use it for, basically. It takes about 10 to 12 minutes, and then we just want to hear your questions and your thoughts.
Right, look, put a scoop full of sugar beet.
Could yeah, I will continue. And I will. Okay. Here we go. So we started with a concept that we called equine-assisted mindfulness, and just doing mindfulness out in nature together with horses. So equine-assisted mindfulness is a combination of mindfulness and experiential learning with horses. And the way I do it and how we have been doing it at Mimer is often nature assisted. So we prefer doing it out in pastures or like mindful walkings out in the woods or in nature in some way. And the nature has their own benefits. I'm not going to go very deep into that, but there is plenty of research showing how good nature is for us. But it also helps us ensure the welfare of the horse. And that is a super, super, super important part for us and how we work. Of course, for the horse, that we keep on having good welfare for them, but also for the outcome of the interventions we do. So it actually matters also. It will, I usually say, the better welfare for the equines we have, the better our interventions will be. So why do we make them trauma sensitive? And trauma sensitive doesn't mean that we focus on resolving trauma. We are not trauma focused. It means that we are educated about trauma, we recognize signs, and we can adapt our activities and interventions to trauma and to support people with trauma. So it means that people who usually have a hard time going to mindfulness can take part in these kind of sessions and interventions because of this. And also it's not only possible for them, but it's actually adaptable, so it actually is good for them as well. So we do a lot of things that is good for grounding and stabilization, but also all the other parts. I will talk more about them later. And even if a person shows up and say, no, I don't have any trauma, we know that some people don't know they have trauma or they don't want to talk about it, but they also can have been working with it and anticipate nothing specific to happen. But any kind of new trauma can trigger old traumas and they can resurface again. So my stance towards this is that I'm always trauma informed, because if you don't have trauma and come to this, it doesn't really matter to you, but it makes huge difference for those who have. It's making everything accessible to everyone. So what is being trauma sensitive? And this is just a short list. There is a lot of other ways to be trauma sensitive, but I think these ones are important. But it's not all of them, of course. So always try to give options. Always let everyone set their own pace. Always let everyone do the things their own way. Always give space. Always have consent for everything you do that includes some kind of touching another being. Invite to pay attention to external world first, not the internal world of someone. Hold back with breathing exercises, body scans, etc. And for yourself, be and stay excited. Be accepting, non-judgmental, and stay open. Be authentic, transparent, clear, and honest, and do not pathologize. So what is mindfulness? There are different definitions of mindfulness, but I use Jon Kabat-Zinn's here. The awareness that arises from paying attention on purpose in the present moment and non-judgmentally. So this is all about how we become more aware. And if we have stress or trauma in our lives, there will be defense mechanisms kicking in. It could be avoidance, but one which is really common in trauma is dissociation. And dissociation is almost kind of the opposite of mindfulness, being mindful. Instead of being aware and connect, you disconnect. And you can disconnect from everything from yourself to others, environment, experience, reality, time, and so on. So to become more mindful, more present in our lives, we can practice mindfulness. But as I said before, mindfulness can be really hard to do if you have trauma. And doing it this way, out in nature with horses, is helping people. And usually when we talk about, or at least that is my impression, that when people talk about equine-assisted mindfulness, we think about this kind of mindfulness that is very kind of being with, hanging with horses, relaxing, helping us rewind, staying calm, and all this. And this is one of the parts of mindfulness, because mindfulness is dual. Being with. But we also have the working with, the other side of mindfulness. So the being with we can do, and that's just basically be as much as you can with yourselves, your feelings, your thoughts. But in the working with, we can expand how much we can tolerate being with ourselves. And the program that I have set up and how we work with it is very much focusing on how we can work with expanding our tolerance. And I try to come up with a way of showing how I think mindfulness is overlapping with experiential learning. So I call it do-be-doing. we are working with, that is the same as we do in experiential learning, we do. And then we have the being with, which creates awareness, but it's also part of experiential learning, the reflecting part. And then we go through these cycles over and over again. Because to say the practice of action with reflection is praxis. Another part that we include is movement and rhythm. And you have a lot of different building and stepping stones you can use in this. Direction, speed, patterns, duration, and so on. And we do this, of course, because it's good for people to move.
Katarina, sorry, I muted you because I wanted to mute other people.
Yeah, okay.
But okay, that was fine.
I saw that. So movement is important because our health, there are health benefits with moving. But there are other ways that movement is really important. And part of that is it actually is helping us with our cognition. So when we build cognition from when we are small, we do that by movement. So we don't only impact and help people stay more healthy by moving, we also help them build new connections in the brain. And you see the last three ones, synchrony, regulation, and entrainment, they have also on the relational aspect of movement. So these are the steps that we use in trauma-sensitive equine-assisted mindfulness. So there are 10 steps, and you can do them as a 10-week program, or we do them in a workshop that we actually do a couple of steps each day. So we start with an introduction and we contextualize what we do. We tell a little bit about mindfulness, we give some a little bit background, just like I did now. We talk about why trauma sensitive and what that means, why we work with nature and why we work with horses. And the second step is what we call mindful gauges. This is kind of a finding your inner compass or learning how to listen to yourself. So when we train that, we learn how to find out what we actually need. So these steps are, we go through them one by one, but we also, if it's a longer program, we keep on jumping back and forth between them. But the mindful gauges is a basic stepping stone or basic step. We have it in the beginning because you will use it through the rest of them. So the third is safety. We work with how people can learn to keep themselves safe or feeling safe, which is two different things. The fourth is resilience, how people can bounce back. The fifth, inner awareness. Sixth, self-compassion. Seventh, belonging. Eighth, presence. And when we come to presence, this is actually where most of the mindfulness program starts. We talk about when you come to many mindfulness programs, also the trainings I have taken, many of them start by saying we are going to become more present. So when you come to this program, you go through all these different steps before we even start to practice the presence in itself. The ninth is mindful attunement and attachment, which is relational again. And the 10th, integration, and how we look back to all of these different steps and integrate all of the knowledge, but also how we bridge it so you can bring it home. And that, of course, you do. If you have it in the 10-week program, you bring it home every week. But if you're on a workshop and you go through all of this in one weekend, we also pay attention to how we can help people, support people to bring it home. On the picture here, you see a lady, she was on one of our workshops. And one of the things we do, experiential, of course, is building things. And instead of just talking about the window of tolerance, we invite people to actually build their own window of tolerance. So when we invite horses into our interventions, I think we always need to ask ourselves why we do that. Why do we have horses present? And for me, it is about this relational aspect. And it's not only about relations to others. It is about the relation to yourself, but also to your body or your mind, your soul, time, environment, whatever. It's a relational aspect. You can train basically anything with another. And then there is also the saying, of course, that horses are always present in the here and now. I don't totally agree with that, but they are super, super good at being present in the moment, much better than we are. So also from that point of view, having horses present is really helpful when you do mindfulness. So what is it that TS-EAM help us with? Many courses in mindfulness and many approaches to mindfulness is inviting a group to do the same things together. You go through the training, you offer the kind of a set of tools, and you learn it the same way. Everybody is present doing it in the same way. here we are tailoring it to each individual. So you can actually find out what works for you. And the whole thing is supposed and supported to be individualized. So when anybody gauge what they need, it would not be the same for someone else, for example. So we hope when you leave, you are better able to support yourself, handling feeling of powerlessness, for example, or overwhelm, and that you have developed. In one weekend, you might not be able to develop resilience, but you will have a better idea about where you are in this, and you will practice self-compassion and safety and belonging. And hopefully, by bringing this home, you will also continue to practice, and you will relate better to yourself and others, and in good, perhaps also by just bringing people out in nature, many find a connection with nature that will just that will support people. And hopefully it will lead to you knowing yourself better, your potentials and your limitations, your strengths and your weaknesses. So we do the workshops, and we go through these 10 different steps. And these are, some of them we will offer during this year. One in Poland, one in Italy, one in Sweden, one in Scotland, and one in UK. And this is just my contact information. And if anybody wants these slides afterwards, I'm happy to share them with you. And this is what I wanted to show you, just to give you a little bit of an idea how we work and how we think about trauma-sensitive equine-assisted mindfulness. And I work with this a lot. For me, it's hard to keep it on a surface level. So I hope I didn't speak like over your heads. I have no idea about your backgrounds, how much you know about mindfulness, and or if you work with equine-assisted learning or etc. So I'm happy to hear your feedback and if you have questions. I can put the slides in the group. Have you all found the group? Trauma-sensitive equine-assisted mindfulness on Facebook? Yeah.
I have just joined the group, but I would like to have the slides. I'm in Portugal.
Yeah. Hi.
Yeah.
Nice meeting you.
Nice meeting you too. This is the first time we meet, but I'm finishing my degree in psychology, and but I've worked with horses before. So this is something that really interests me. I stopped in October because my horse died, and I'm still dealing with that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So far, I'm giving myself a break. Hopefully, I will go back, and for some reason this interested me, and I think maybe there's something I would like to have the experience first, and maybe then start working with it.
Yeah.
We'll see.
I very much recommend you trying it out on yourself first.
Yeah.
It is actually really super hard to present this because it's so experiential in its nature. So describing experiences is super hard. So it becomes really theoretical when you do it this way. So I hope it wasn't too dry. Or
It was fine. I mean, my experience with horses, I did a 2-year training with a French psychologist. She's very known in Portugal. She created her own method, and it's about equine-assisted interventions. Nathalie Durel, maybe you have heard about her. And I think she wrote something for one of the first meetings, A Horse is a Horse. And I was her student for 2 years, and then I did a post-graduation course in Brazil. Santiago, cuidado. Menos. Sorry, it's my son. And yeah, so, but the equine-assisted mindfulness is something, in a sense, new to me, applied to trauma. That's why I was interested in this, because I believe this is very it's a very interesting way to work with people. So thank you.
You're welcome. I think there are many benefits with mindfulness. I really think equine assisted therapy is a really good intervention, but mindfulness, you can reach more people. You can have it in groups. It's less complicated, and you don't go into working with people's trauma, but you still support them. And I think that's a really important area. And I think we can do a lot from those ones of you who already work with equine assisted interventions. And especially now, like you look in times like this, that we need to reach people and help with supporting people and resourcing them, basically.
Yeah, I was going to say that I believe we all have some kind of trauma, especially nowadays, but we all do somehow.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any unclarities in what I was speaking about?
Oh, not an unclarity, Katerina, and thank you very much for presenting this. It's early in the morning in New Zealand, and I'm just waking up. But I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about a little bit more about the steps. Like I particularly love, and I'm just sort of imagining a 10-week program where you work through the steps.
Mm.
And all of these pieces are explored before presence.
Yeah.
And I just wondered if you could, because that feels really important. And I was wondering if you could say a little bit more about how you work with those early steps with, say, a 10-week program with a group.
If we have a 10-week group program, the first time they just come for the introduction and the background, and we just go basically out to say hi to the horses, nothing more. So it's very stepwise, and that's being trauma informed as well. You don't, you're not in a hurry. You go slow. And especially the safety part, that people understand that they are also can help themselves, keep themselves emotionally safe. So it's not only for us. So that's why it's super important in the beginning of the program. And equally much with the resilience. So it's always hard. I have a couple of I don't call it exercises, but invitations we do with the horses, with people for the different steps. But it's always, I usually talk about thinking on your feet. Sometimes you need to switch really fast, and you will need to come up with something else because somebody's reacting to something, or I'm trying to give as much choice as I can. Always inviting to, you can do this and you can also do that, and you can, it is utilizing a lot of movement. So letting people move around together with horses and saying, for example, not only working with breath as in focusing on your breath, but you can go to a horse and you can put your hand on a horse, and then you can, in your out breath, you do a stroke. So you focus on something while you do something. So it's not only focusing on the breath, because it becomes too internal. But if you have something external to focus on, it helps. And it's the same. Sometimes we don't even go to the horses as a first step, because that can also be a little bit. So we just ask people to walk and take a step and take a breath in and stop and breathe out and keep on doing that. Later on, when we work with the more relational aspects of it, we can invite to do that together with a horse. So you go to a horse and you try to synchronize your movements. You move in synchrony with a horse. And even some of these, even if we put these topics up and tell them in beforehand, we're going to go through these different steps. And for example, sometimes you just say belonging and people start crying. and then you need to back off a bit again. And so it's a lot about anchoring and grounding and very slow. Then you can end up with a group who can do much more, and you can invite more things. But this is why I want people to try it themselves first before they try it on someone else, because it's really powerful. So what I've learned through doing this is actually slowing down a lot and doing less. Keep it very basic. Did that give you a little bit idea, Ingrid?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, thanks.
We have another person raising hand.
Yeah.
Hi,
Yeah.
I'm Elaine, and you can probably see by the light I'm in California in the US, so it's early in the day here. I just first want to say thank you so much for sharing your work with us. It's really generous and really interesting. I really appreciate it. I work in equine assisted work with highly sensitive people. And although not all HSPs or highly sensitive people have experienced trauma, most have. At least living in the Western world, because the world's not particularly appropriate. And I really appreciate the idea about how slow we need to go and willingness to step back, when you walk into the trap of going too fast. I do that. Almost all of my clients do. I love that you said walking in sync. We use that a lot. And I noticed, and I wondered if you had, that for many people who are really on edge that way, that they might need to just stand in sync, even, 6 or 8 meters away from the horse.
Yeah.
That when they get so close to the horse, it's just so activating because their energy's so activated that the horses struggle with it, or that the people struggle with it. And I was just wondering what you think about physical proximity.
And that's actually, thank you for bringing that up, because I would say one of the invitations that I look out for the most to protect the horses is actually doing things in synchrony and moving in synchrony with horses. And I have had several times when I have needed to intervene, because the synchrony, for some reason, it makes people focus really, really hard on mimicking and doing in synchrony. And that can be totally overwhelming for the horses, which is not good, of course. So part of my work is observing the horses and understanding what goes on, for example, about energy levels, and then pull people back. So that's a super important thing to keep in mind, that not anything of what we're doing or inviting to could be good for the people if it's not good for the horses. And usually people are really caught up in what they are doing, so we can't ask them to pay attention to how the horses are doing. That's our job, which is why I always prefer to work in a team. So I have actually, when I am the mindfulness instructor, I really like to have an equine professional present with me in my team.
I like to work in a team too. It's so wonderful.
Yes.
Thank you so much. I really enjoy learning from you.
Yeah, thanks. I'm not keeping track of the chat. Are you doing that, Marta? If there is some question.
Yes, I am.
Yeah.
There were some questions about the group. Some people want to contact you directly. So what's your email?
Send emails and messengers.
Yes, I'm distributing your email. There was one question, I guess, in the beginning. Oh, Anna asked, what's the difference between trauma-sensitive mindfulness and ordinary mindfulness?
Ordinary mindfulness, the good ones are trauma sensitive. but many people who work with mindfulness doesn't know about trauma. So they would, one of the most common exercises is breathing exercises. I would never ever start with breathing exercises with somebody who has trauma. It can be hugely triggering. And other ways is body scanning. That can also be hugely triggering. You're basically inviting people to go inside their bodies and experiencing feelings. And that could be very, very triggering. So instead of doing a body scan, you can focus on the body of the horse, for example. You can talk about, usually I try to slowly bring people into using their senses more. People come very disconnected, and just inviting them to touch, to talk about, if I invite them to pick up a stone, for example, and explore that, like, what do you feel? Is it cold? Is it, what texture does it have? And smelling things, and going, having the horses, you always have someone there. And most people who come to these things actually like horses. So it's not like, I don't know, you could end up working with somebody who does not want to approach a horse, but mostly people do. And I'm thinking about myself. I really like to sniff horses. I love horse smell. So it's then we help people to remember these things that they experience, so they can also bring that home with them, like making mental pictures. They're staying there, having a lovely moment with the horse, and then we don't rush by that, but we stay with it and talk about how they can remember this, how they can use this, how they can, when they are stressed, can remind themselves about horse smell, or the sound of a horse chewing, or even taking a picture of the horse and having it in their phone. Because it's all these different tools that people can have when they get stressed and get fearful, get triggered, that they have been practicing so much and reflecting on it that you actually can come up with using it. Otherwise, it will just be good things, like theoretically.
Yes, so it's a little bit more external than.
It's external, and it's also about giving choices.
Mm.
I would never invite a group to, like, please close your eyes or something like that. I would say, you can choose yourself if you want to close your eyes, but you can also have them open. So always give choices. And if you invite to some, like, you are actually doing a small body scan, I would say that you can do this, but you can also just skip parts. If you come to part of your body you don't want to scan, just skip it.
Yes.
So it's always about making sure everybody has space, the space they need. I would never reach out and touch someone to correct them for something, or just touching them without consent. I would also ask, is it okay if I touch you?
And give them choices.
Choices all the time. Without leaving them hanging, because sometimes if you give them an open-ended choice, they need to make a choice, and that can also be uncomfortable. So you need to read the group, and if you see that people are, like, just stuck, you give them two options.
Okay.
And then you monitor yourself all the time, so you stay really grounded and figure out how you need to do that.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
We have 2 hands raised, from Anne and from Maya. Anne, are you there?
Oh, sorry, I wasn't sure who you wanted to go first.
You were first one.
First of all, thank you so much for this very informative presentation. I've really look forward to hearing more. My question was, you mentioned the welfare of the horse, which I think is so imperative in this work, because sometimes they can get equally as stressed. So my question is, when you have clients with the horses, are the horses loose
Yes, they are.
always, or like are there some times that perhaps depending on what you would like them to experience? Or
I would say the only time they are not loose if we take horses on mindful walking in the woods, then they would have
Okay.
halters on. I would do that with a group I know. I would never start with that. So usually I work in a pasture with loose horses. I go out and work in the pasture where the horses live. That's my preference.
Okay.
Because then the horses are comfortable and safe. And I also like to work in big pastures so the horses actually can leave when they want to.
right, okay,
So they take part if they want to, and they can leave if they want to.
all right, thank you for that.
Yeah. Sometimes I work in facilities and I don't have that option. I do debate a lot with myself about the welfare of the horses I work with. I find it very important. And one part of that is I, as a facilitator, am also in a relationship with the horses I work with. So I'm role modeling relationship. And everything I do, say, how I touch a horse, whatever I do, will be seen by my participants. So if I can't treat this being who hasn't signed up to do this work, if I can't treat them with respect and give them all the things I talk about, like choices, etc., the people will learn from me in some kind of discrepancy. They will pick up what I do, and then they will hear what I say. And if it's not congruent, they will walk away by having learned something like in an embodied way by what I do, by what I show. And then they will have picked up something else verbally, and that is never good. I'm very, very aware of how I act and interact with everyone, especially the horses.
Makes sense.
Yeah,
Thank you.
does.
Thank you.
Maya, are you ready?
Yes, thank you. Hello, everyone. I greet you from Poland, where it's dark outside, unfortunately.
Yes.
Thank you for your presentation and your fantastic work. I'm a psychotherapist, art therapist, and I also use mindfulness in my practice. And I have two questions. The first is, from my observation, many people contact with horses for many people brings some anxiety or very huge anxiety. How do you cope with that? Or if you discuss it or not, what do you think about this?
You mean that the people are anxious about the horses?
Yes, many people are anxious about the horses, and even though they take part in such workshops, they are very, very anxious.
I handle it in different ways. Sometimes I talk about it straight out, like horses are big beings and can seem intimidating, and sometimes I share my own stories about how I can be fearful sometimes, and how I found out that horses doesn't actually care about that I'm scared or fearful, as long as I don't pretend that I'm not, is my experience. I try to make it okay. Any feeling is okay. Anxiousness is natural. It's normal. You're perhaps in a new place. You don't know the horses. Maybe you don't even know me. And I try to neutralize it as much as I can. Sometimes we do shaking exercises, like you can just do away from the horses. Then I if I invite people to going out to the horses and then I still feel that there is anxiousness in the group or something like that, we walk really, really slow, and I often invite people to like go even slower than you usually do, and I give them little exercises of please find 3 things in the environment where the horses live that you paid attention to, and then I give examples, could be like leaves or stones or sticks or whatever, and bring them to me so they don't focus immediately on the horses. And at the same time, I often use, as I said, I work in a team, so one is monitoring what's happening with the horses. And if they seem fine, the horses are looking up, not moving away from us, even perhaps approaching us, I let the anxiousness be. So you don't always need to like work to remove it. Sometimes you can't, and so it's always this monitoring, making decisions, maybe have plan B, but paying attention to what happened with the horses and with the humans, giving options again and choices. And I know that everybody's not doing that. I often use myself as an example of whatever, basically, because I can be very fearful, I can be very scared and very nervous and all of this. So it also brings it down a little bit. It's just human and normal.
Okay, thank you. So it's very different from traditional horse riding training, yes, where they different. Say you can't be afraid.
Yeah, you can be afraid as you want.
You need to dominate.
Oh God, it's totally different.
Okay. Yes. Okay, thank you. And my another question was, if your workshop is more for people who want to work with themselves, or more for professionalists who would like to take some advice and try this method with their clients, for example, as me, or both?
I would say it is both, but it is meant for anyone. You can sign up and come to the workshop and never ever want to work with this in your life, and maybe you're not even in working with equines or psychotherapy or anything. But if you want to learn more about it, I would encourage to always start with the workshop and try it out for yourself.
Okay. Do we need some special experience with horses, or
no?
Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Any more questions or thoughts?
Maybe I could add something for Maya, because the workshop in Poland will be in my place. So yeah. It's very non-riding place. I mean, the horses here haven't been ridden, some of them never. And we work in a very huge space with a forest and a meadow and some kind of, nature-based place. So I guess it takes away all the which comes together with being in a typically equestrian environment sometimes, where there are special places, like there are stables, boxes, people doing something, some horses being moved around, all this commotion that comes together with a riding club or something. And much of this, I mean, in where we are going to work here.
That sounds wonderful. This is Lauren in Norway. Hi. I was thinking of maybe doing the workshop in Sweden, but because I thought I could drive there, but it's going to be a very, very long drive. Where are you in Poland?
It's central Poland, near Warsaw. Okay. So it's like 45 kilometers from Warsaw.
So the airport would be...
Yes, it's very accessible. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
And the name of the Facebook group? I saw you put a link up, but
yes, you will find it in the chat. Yeah.
The name
Great.
is just trauma sensitive equine assisted mindfulness, TS-EAM.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Katarina. This was not too theoretical at all. You gave a wonderful.
Great. I
presentation.
can get stuck in theory. So and on
No.
Zoom, when I don't have any horses and no nature at my hands.
No, it was wonderful. It was a wonderful introduction and got me very excited to do more with it.
Oh, I'm happy. Thank you.
My cat enjoyed it too.
Great. Yeah.
We have two questions on the chat. One is, where does the 10-week program take place? Maybe we'll start with that.
Yeah, there is no program running. I have set it up for we had it as for youth, for young girls at risk, as a project that we would run in Sweden, but we didn't get it funded. So we do it now in this workshop version instead. So I don't have a huge facility in Sweden for the moment, so I can't run any programs on my own. I need to come to places, which is why I often get stuck in educating people instead. But I will go to Marta's place and give it, and I will give it a workshop in Scotland, and one in Italy, one in southern UK, down in Devon. Did I forget someone? And one in Sweden, of course. Yeah. I'm happy. I can just add, Marta, I'm happy to support you if you want to set up the program as a 10-week program. I'm happy to give you input on that.
Great. Do you also run professional trainings after someone has done the initial workshop? And thank you for an excellent presentation too.
You're welcome.
A question and a compliment together.
Yes, I'm going to a place in England in 2 weeks, and they have bought 1 day from me that I will train their staff on how to work with this. I'm also setting up a specific module about how to work with trauma-sensitive equine assisted mindfulness. I don't know how much you know about our other trainings in Mimer. We run level 1 to level 4 equines in therapy and learning programs. We run them in person and online. And we go through all the stuff. I talk about equine welfare, equine behavior, how to do the experiential work, neutral language, teamwork, a lot of different things, experiential learning, and a lot of theories behind this work we go through also. So my wish, of course, would be that you would take those trainings, because that would make me training you to do equine assisted mindfulness much easier. But we will have a module specifically with just the equine assisted mindfulness part. So if you're interested, please let me know.
I have a question. Is it okay to just ask a question?
Please.
Yeah. I am from Sweden, so please help me with my language if I have some problems. I would like to ask if you could talk a little bit more about consent, because I'm thinking about, naturally there is no straight answer, absolutely not, but I'm thinking about when you are, in my experience, when you are really anxious, you could have help from like someone touching your body, like helping you to regulate. You don't remember right or left, you could have help from someone like turning you to the right, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean.
And it could also be super bad, you know, to do that.
I would say
how do you ask for consent to someone that is very disconnected? Because then you cannot, if I mean, just a question.
But I think you
may
should
touch your body. That's.
Yeah. I think I'm often very open with my own experiences, and I have a lot of childhood trauma myself in my background. I'm also neurodivergent. I react super strongly to people touching me without consent, and I've experienced a lot of people trying to regulate me by touching me, which I always react very strongly to. So even if people are super dissociated, super disconnected, please verbally ask them anyway, because they are somewhere in there and they will register that you did that. You tried to get a consent. And maybe they can just nod or they can move away as a no, but don't touch people without. I wouldn't do that. I would do other things to regulate them instead. I would point toward the horse. I will somehow invite them to get down on the ground. I would give them something to hold. I will do anything but touch them, because probably that will be very triggering, unless they don't express that is what they need. And then, of course, you need to figure out if you can actually give them what they ask for, because that's another part.
Yes, and yes, and also that only the question can be triggering sometimes, I think. But maybe you could do the opposite, like not doing something that makes a person to need to back away, but offer them to come. Like if you want me to help you, you could come and stand, like moving around, like you could stand by my side.
Yeah, of course you can do that.
Then the active, they would be active to take part in this. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, it's interesting, I think.
Yeah, I think it's super important with consent, and I think it's also how we role model that with horses, that we don't just grab hold of horses in different ways, that we actually role model how we make sure the horse know we are there, how we look for connecting with them in different ways before we reach out and just grab hold, or you know, if they're standing, sleeping, or resting, or just, yeah, consent is important.
There is another question in the chat.
You
ready?
Yep.
Are there any resources you particularly recommend for learning more about becoming trauma sensitive?
Yeah, I would recommend David Treleaven. He's written a book that's called Trauma Sensitive Mindfulness. He also gives courses online, and I have taken them. They're really good. And I don't know if you saw it on the slide with the different steps, but the first steps are based on his teachings. And then we have added a couple and expanded a little bit on them and adapted it to equine-assisted learning, etc. But I highly recommend his book and his training. There is also, if you work with severe trauma and dissociation, I recommend Christine Forner's book about creative mindfulness and meditations. It's also really good. I recommend Jamie Marick. She is a trauma specialist working with EMDR, and I took a training in dancing mindfulness. It was very good. She does a couple of different trainings, expressive arts as well. And then Kathy Marchiodi do trainings together with Elizabeth Warson on equine-assisted expressive arts. So it's coming more and more, this how we can combine different ways of working. I love to add expressive arts also to what we do, and Ulla-Karin and I have experimented a little bit with that in our trainings in Sweden. Because when I talk about experiential learning, many people understand that as just doing learning by doing. But I always emphasize, like, you need to have the reflective part as well. It's not experiential learning if you don't add the reflection. But the reflection doesn't need to be verbal. So you can reflect by painting, you can reflect by moving, dancing, or singing, or doing basically anything that is somehow helping you with your processes, and then express them in some way. And if you let me loose on the theory, I will never stop talking. So.
Okay, I put names of the people you mentioned. I'm putting them right now, actually, in the chat. So David Treleaven and Christine Forne, and the names will be. So if you want to Google them,
there as well.
Can you do it? Can you write this last name, Katarina?
Yeah, of course.
Thank you. Maybe this is a good moment for my announcement, because I'll be leaving you guys in like a minute. So I have another meeting. So thank you all very much for coming, and it was a pleasure to meet you and to hear your questions and your curiosities. I hope to see you in Poland. Bye-bye.
See you in Poland. Take care, Martha.
Thank you. Bye.
I can be around for a little longer if you have more questions. We say bye-bye to Martha. So that's if you want some more for today, or if you're happy with this hour. Please just unmute yourself and ask questions, or put them in the chat, or otherwise I will just say thank you and goodbye for today. Okay, take care all of you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. It was really wonderful. Thank you.
You're welcome. I will stop the recording.
Thank you, Katarina. Really hope to be able to do some training with you at some point, all the way from down here.